Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sip and Knit podcast. My name is Sarah of Sarah Kareen Knits. You can find me on Instagram as Stitch in the Six and on Ravelry as Sarah Kareen or Sarah and Kareen Knits for my designs, which there's only one. It's a sock pattern if you ever wanted to check that out. All of the links will be down below in the description. I'm going to do my best to link any patterns that I discuss and link my own personal Ravelry for any project details that you might be interested in that I might have missed while talking about it. I am starting to keep up my Ravelry because of the podcast. It's not something that I've been really good about doing previously. So if you have any questions about a specific pattern that I talk about or that you see, please just leave a comment here or contact me on Ravelry or Instagram. I'd be happy to give you insight if it there was a modification or I didn't write down the yarn or something like that, because that would not be shocking. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. This is the Sip and Knit podcast. So we'll talk a little bit about what I'm sipping on today. This is a tea. Again, last episode was also tea. And this is day 5 of the Bird and Blend Advent calendar. Today is December 5th. You'll be seeing this on December 6th. So my hope is that if you have this Advent calendar, you've opened day 5. But if you have not, please do. It's very hot. That's why I took a baby sip. If you have not opened your day 5 and you have this calendar, please, I won't feel sad about it. Just skip forward like 30 seconds so that you don't get spoiled. But this was day 5. Looks like this. It's got really cute little booties on the back. And on the side of the box, they tell you some information about the tea. So today is the candy cane. It's the first black tea that we've gotten. The first 2 were fruit, and then we got an herbal and a something else. I'll put it here. Yeah, so this is a black tea with or without milk, which I prefer teas that pair well with a milk in it. So I was very happy about this because all of them previously have been without. It tastes better. So this is nice. It is black tea with spearmint, lime, pink cornflowers, red cornflowers, stevia, and natural flavoring. So it's that minty, spicy feeling on the tongue. Very nice. Yes, so we've been really enjoying this. It's been sort of this has been our Christmas treat to ourselves. We kind of decided that we weren't going to do Christmas gifts proper. We were more so going to do anything that's come in the mail recently. We're squirreling away and wrapping so that we have something under our tree. But we're not doing proper, what's the word I'm looking for? Secret from each other. My partner and I, we're not really doing any of that just because I'll get into it. But basically, buying things for the sake of buying things doesn't resonate with me. I don't love it. And I feel like Christmas, at least for the way, and again, anytime I'm giving something about this, something like this where I'm talking about something that you might feel entirely the opposite, just know that I am so happy if you have a different relationship with Christmas than what I'm about to explain. This is just where I'm kind of coming from, is that I love Christmas movies. I love the decor. I love all of it. The part that I don't like is that someone's going to buy you something and you're going to feel obligated to buy them something because it's a holiday and because the holiday says that you should buy them a gift, right? So yeah, we've just sort of done away with that a little bit. I found out Monica sort of didn't follow the rules and got me something a little bit that I'm not aware of, but knowing her, it will be a functional, useful, something I've wanted to buy for myself type of gift, which I'm more than happy to receive because it's very thoughtful and kind. So yes, that's where I kind of stand on the holiday. If you feel the same, love to know. If you feel differently, I'd also love to know. It used to be my favorite holiday growing up, and I loved it, spending it with family and stuff. I think it's just changed as I've grown into adulthood and am sort of doing it as our own family unit now. Yeah, I think our approach is changing a little bit. So That's a little bit of a share about me, but this is a knitting podcast. So if you're here for the knitting, I'm very sorry. It probably took me a solid 5 minutes to get there, but we're gonna start talking about it now with finished objects / what I'm wearing. We'll start with what I'm wearing first, so that I can button my my jumpsuit all the way up. So I'm wearing my Jessie Made Designs Ripple Bralette. This is the fingering weight version. She has a Ripple Bralette DK as well, which I'm planning on doing very soon, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But yes, this is my Ripple Bralette. I talked about it last episode because I have some scraps left of the yarn that I used. It's 4 Boys yarn in the Merry & Pippin colorway. So it's like this cream with all the speckles. If you've seen Lord of the Rings, you've watched the trilogy, you know that Merry & Pippin wear like teal, maroon, green, and gold. Those are like their colors. So that's all the colors that are in here. It's very lovely. I'm wearing this scarf that's it was gifted to me a couple Christmases ago. And I love the big, like, thin scarves because this jumpsuit is like a teeny tiny little strap, which is cute because you can like see the strap of the bralette underneath, and I really like that, but it's freezing. So I was not about to like be bare shouldered in like below freezing weather. That's just not practical. But in the winter, this is how I would wear that. And then in the summer, like under overalls, very cute. We love to see it. Okay. And then I'm also like, this is a double whammy because, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this, I'm wearing socks that are covered in dog hair. Can you see them? I don't know. These are my Spring Rain socks that I test knit for Northern Knits and Purl. Natasha is her like actual name, but I feel like I might not be the only one who knows people by their Ravelry handles or their Instagram handles. But yes, they were knit out of chromatic yarns. That's Hannah of the Corner of Craft with some scrap blue, TARDIS blue that I got for my anniversary from my partner. And yeah, they're lovely. They're a broken rib with a little bit of color work on the toe and a little bit of cable at the top. They're really fun, like engaging knit, and the heel flap is the easiest heel flap construction for picking up the stitches that I've ever worked. I'm not a huge fan of heel flap and gusset. Those ones were really great. A little bit about the Ripple Bralette if you haven't made one already, because let's be honest, it's one of those patterns that if you are aware of Jessie May and you like the idea of wearing knitwear as like an undergarment, you've probably made this already, but just in case you're wondering, I sized up my needles for both the bottom ribbing and the body than what the pattern calls for, because Jessie May is a very loose knitter. I've like watched her videos and I'm like, yeah, no, there's no way we're the same needle size for tension. I did not swatch for this because frankly, I was like, if I knit the size that suits me and I like the fabric, it's gonna be fine. So I knit the size large or the size 4 on a size larger than the pattern calls for. I think it was like a US 4 and a US 6. Might have been a US 3 and a US 5. I don't remember. But that's what I knit those on. And my socks I knit on a US 1 2.25 millimeter magic loop, because that's how I knit most of my socks. We'll talk about that today too. Ironically, I'm knitting 2 socks right now. Since the last episode, I cast on 2 pairs of socks, and I'm knitting neither of those with that needle and that method, but here we are. So that's a little bit about what I am wearing today, about me and my feelings on Christmas. We're gonna talk about knitting, don't get me wrong. We're gonna talk about knitting, but I also really want to take a moment to talk about like this. So this is episode 5 of this podcast. If you're unfamiliar, my first 3 episodes were shorter and much more produced. Moving forward, I'm making them longer and less produced. And I also am going to, in this episode, sort of talk about the structure of the podcast moving forward. So what you can anticipate hearing me talk about in terms of like at the top of the show, a list of all the things we're going to discuss. Top of the show, I will introduce myself and I will talk about the finished objects that I'm wearing, because it's been a year since I've been podcasting, so we need to catch up with finished objects. And then I'm going to talk about finished objects that I'm not wearing, so like recent finished objects, as well as works in progress that are on my needles currently. And then what I would like to do is take a moment to discuss things that are happening in the fiber world, things that I've been thinking about as they relate to my craft. And I'm gonna call that segment Knitical Thinking. like critical thinking, but punny. I thought I was very proud of myself. Thank you to those of you who voted on the Instagram poll between knitical thinking and thinking knittically. Knitical thinking won by a landslide, so we're gonna go with that. And then after that segment, we're gonna talk a little bit about what I've been doing like personally, and TV shows that I've been watching, books I've been listening to on Audible, that sort of thing. And it's gonna be one of those things where like, after I talk about whips, and after whips, I'm gonna talk about future plans and projects instead of stash acquisitions, so that I can shout out like yarn dyers and knitwear designers and stuff, instead of just doing a parade of like, look what I bought. I'd much rather it be useful for you in the sense of like project planning and seeing where my head's at with that. I find that more useful when people talk about it in that context. So that's what I'm going to do here. Instead, it will not be doing a stash acquisitions segment, then knitical thinking, then all of that. So that is all to say that if you're someone who prefers a knitting only podcast, you can feel comfortable knowing that like at a certain point, once I'm done talking about yarn and future project planning, that if you don't want to discuss, I encourage you to stick around. But if you don't want to listen to me discuss my relationship with knitting and fiber crafts and consumerism and all of these things that have sort of been noodling around in my brain, and the reason I'm here in front of my phone camera to talk about this in the first place, just know that I'll sort of at the end of the, or I guess third of the way through the episode, sort of say, hey, 2/3 of the way? Yep. Hey, by the way, we're moving on now. We're not going to talk about knitting proper. We're going to just sort of speak more abstractly and more personally. So if you're not down for that, you can know when to tune out. There we go. At this point, you might have already, because I haven't talked about knitting for yet another 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to get my notes set up and I'm going to pull out my 1FO and yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, so let's talk about finished objects. Last episode, this was the bulk of the show. That's pretty much all I talked about because I had a lot of gift knitting that I was ready to discuss. Today, not so much. There's only one finished object and it's not even blocked. So whether or not you would count that as a finished object, let me know, but I do. The ends are woven in, so I think it counts. So this is a cowl. It is small. I tried to get it out of 50 grams of the main color because I have another 50 grams that I also wanted to make mittens out of. And I was a little worried if I broke into that second skein, this would be, like I wouldn't get the mittens. So this is more like a neck warmer that you can like pull around your face to keep your nose warm, that sort of thing. This is a gift for a family member. And she is very like dark neutrals. And then she wears like a fabulous pop of color on her lips, like red or like this, similar to like this purple color. So I thought I would sort of play off that with her wardrobe and like the way that she decides to do her makeup and sort of like try to play with that a little bit in what I made for her. So this cowl was a German twisted cast on to keep it nice and stretchy, and then some stockinette with some like pearl bumps in there with a contrast color, and then a sewn bind off, again, to keep it stretchy on both ends. I quite like it. So I'll do a bit of a close up. Where's the seam so I can hide that? It's a little bit joggy. So yeah, so that's what it looks like there. Again, kind of small. She's much smaller than I am, so I'm hoping it's gonna be okay. And frankly, if she doesn't really like it, she has not stepchildren. She has children and children-in-law. I don't know what you would call that. Children and their spouses, that, you know, if she doesn't feel that she's going to wear it, she can always, you know, pass it forward. I have no problem with that. I would never take offense. So that's my finished object. There is no pattern for this. This was noggin. But if you are interested in it and you want the details of like exactly the stitch count and the numbers and all of those things, let me know in the comments. Maybe I will write it. I'm going to be honest, it's quite simple. So I don't know that it's worth the time in the PDF, but if you feel like you would make it, it was a really quick gift knit. It was like 2 nights. Let me know. Maybe you can convince me to write it into a pattern. I can't promise anything. The yarn is Wool of the Andes from Knit Picks, one of my favorite sort of use it for everything cheap yarn. This is the superwash version. It is traditionally non-superwash. Now, the person who this is for, she's from Ireland. She, you know, grew up there for some time. She has been around wool, has worn wool. Like, I know that's not going to be a problem for her. But I also wanted to, in case, I don't want to say exactly who it is, because if they watch, then they'll know. But if her spouse, my dad, gets hold of it and accidentally chucks it in the wash, I didn't want it to cause a ruined situation. So that's why we went superwash with this one. This is the color Fairy Tale, and I'm freaking obsessed with this. It's so pretty. I can't wear this color as a full sweater, I don't think. I think I would love making it, but then probably never wear it. So too bad, but it's really gorgeous. And then this is the color Bittersweet, and it's this like deep chocolate. Not heathered really, either of them. They're pretty solid colors. Now, the reason I mentioned the Ripple Bralette DK is because while this is Wool of the Andes worsted weight, it knits up at a DK gauge. I knit the cowl on a US 6 and it's not dense at all. So what I'm thinking is I can, because I have a whole other 50-gram skein of this, and I used maybe 5 grams for the contrast, and I'll use a little bit on the mittens as well. They'll mostly be this color. And then I can make a Ripple Bralette instead, and I can have this color in my wardrobe without it being a whole sweater, because this is loud, you know? So that's kind of my workaround, is that I'm gonna use this in like a subtle way, and I can wear it with my overalls and it'll be really cute. So that's my plan with that. I don't think I'll have any of this left over. I used every single gram of the 50 grams for the cowl. So if I have a little bit, who knows, I have like a scrap crochet blanket that it could go into for that. So that is my finished object. Not very many. Like I said, I sort of got carried away. Last episode, I was like, yeah, so moving forward, I'm not going to cast on anything new, and I'm going to work on getting my gifts done and all of my whips off the needles. Instead, I cast on 2 socks. Great. I really love knitting socks. They're my like comfort project. And this week I was having some health issues and needed to go to the doctor, and I was in between appointments. And I said, oh my gosh, the second appointment, like I'm going to be in the waiting room, because it wasn't an appointment per se, like you just had to go and wait for your turn. So I was like, okay, I'll just very quickly cast on a sock. And so I did. And it's quite cute, to be honest. I'm very happy that I cast it on, even though it's sort of taking away from the fact that like I still have a headband to knit for my dad, a pair of mitts to go with that cowl, and potentially another hat for my friend, because I feel like I'm only making her mitts and I feel like that's not enough. Like I do this to myself, but here we are. Anyway, I digress. You can look forward to seeing that in 2 weeks probably, because I think I'm going to do this podcast every 2 weeks instead of every week, because I can only knit so fast. So these are not a pattern per se, but kind of. So this is the Peekaboo fold over cuff by Edible Thoughts Makes on YouTube and Instagram, and I believe that also might be her Ravelry handle. She is an incredible, like, she has an incredible eye for color, and making something that it's just like, it's got her like unique touch on it. I don't really know how to explain it other than that. Like it just, whenever I see a photo, like I know it's hers, and I'm always so pleased when she shares on Instagram, because it's just always beautiful and always inspiring, and it's just a really great time. So if you don't follow her, Edible Thoughts Makes on Instagram, that is a suggestion from me, because it's really lovely. It being her work, and she as a person is also great. So yeah, so this is her Peekaboo cuff tutorial. It's on YouTube. I'll link it below. But essentially it just instructs on how to, like, the appropriate cast on method and the appropriate number of rows for the pop of color and then the main color to make this like fold over situation. I keep hearing that fold over cuffs are extremely comfy and like hug the ankle in like a nice but not too tight way. So I wanted to give it a try for my partner to see how it goes. to see if it's a little more comfortable for her than like a traditional ribbing. So the orange is a Knit Pick Stroll colorway, and it is something, it's a name that's like something to do with how hot orange this is. So that's that one. I don't have the ball band. I wound that up ages ago. I've used it already in the other pair of socks that I showed last week. Also, I found this, and this is from my self-striping socks that I showed last week. So does it have the colorway name? It says Bliss, but I think that's the base. That's hilarious. So I thought this was gonna have the name on it so that I could correct last week, because I was like, Hopeless Romantic ? And now I don't even know for sure. So here we are. Oh wait. Ahaha. So if you watched last week's episode, you would know that I knit some stripy socks for grandma. Hopeless Romantic, I was right. So if you're looking for it, Cozy Knitter, Hopeless Romantic, that was the colorway. Alrighty, so this, however, because you're probably curious, is called Psychedelic Sunset by Knit Picks. And it is Felici, it is self-striping, it is super fun. So I was knitting it and I was like, why is the blue bigger? I had never read the name. I literally just looked at the colors and was like, it's a rainbow. It's not. So what it actually is Psychedelic Sunset, and that makes sense because if you look at it, it looks like a sunset into water and then land. Just super bright colors. I see it now. So that's this. This is ready to get a heel. I originally was going to do my heels, toes, and cuffs in this hot orange, but I instead have decided that I'm going to do white heels and white toes because I think that will look really fun, like primary school vibes, even though they're for an adult person. I want to do that, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to do white heels and toes because I think I'm going to lose a stitch. Because I think that will be fun. So yes, those are them. And they're in my Northern Knits and Pearls bag with my gelatinous cube pin from Foundry, I think is the name. Yeah, so that's that. And then we'll talk about my other socks that were like, I'll call it an accidental cast on. I don't really know how else to describe it. So, oh yeah, so those are on US 1's 9-inch circulars because that's what I had available at the time. And that's an easy like travel cast on. So that's what I did. And then these are on US 2, which is 2.75 millimeters. And these are going to be cozy house socks. So I've started a toe up with Judy's Magic Cast On. And I've knit a few inches of the foot. These are 60 stitches. This is a sport weight yarn. And I think that they're gonna be slightly too big, but I don't mind that because they're gonna be cozy house socks. So if they're a little slouchy and not as like properly fitted, it doesn't really matter because they're not going into a shoe. So this is really what I care about for these socks, is not necessarily how I'm knitting them or anything else, except for like the yarn is what was important to me. So this is, I'm gonna do the cuff in this color for these, and then I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna do the other pair in this color with the blue cuff, and then they're gonna be for my partner and I, and we can just interchange because I've talked about it before, but we can share socks. So this is Briggs & Little Dura Sport. It is a 1-ply, 80% pure wool, 20% nylon, and it comes in 4 ounces or 113 grams. It is a sport weight, but you get 430 yards, which I think is pretty wild. So that's that. This is the color Rosewood, and this is the color Denim. I am loving the way that this blue looks knit up. It's like slightly heathered, and my hands are probably fully in the way. It's like slightly heathered and really, really beautiful. I just really love the way that it looks. So that's that. I picked this up when I was in Nova Scotia visiting a friend at L&K Yarns, I believe was the name. The owner was fabulously nice. The yarn selection was really great. I have only ever seen Briggs & Little online, so I was really excited when I saw it in person to like understand like the texture of this yarn. It is somewhere between soft and like crunchy is not the right word. It's dry. Like you don't feel oil, like spinning oil in it or anything like that. Like it's quite dry. And it's toothy is a good word for it. Like it's not the softest up next to your neck, but I'm also curious if that's going to change with blocking. I will let you guys know. If I like the fabric that I get and I find that it softens with blocking, I might do a pullover in it because it's so cost effective. This is $7 Canadian, $7.50. And like I said, it's 430 yards. So I'm thinking maybe like a Cozy Classic light or a very V-neck raglan in this would be chef's kiss. So good. So that is my second sock that I accidentally put on the needles without intention. Other than really what happened was I got some self-striping for a Christmas cast on, Christmas being like the month of December, to knit some Christmas socks. That hasn't come yet, which is fine. I have zero qualms about it. That's how shipping works. But it was one of those things where I was like, okay, well, instead I'll make my cozy warm socks for the month of December and I will wrap that yarn as if it's a gift and I'll just have something to open on Christmas instead. I'm making my partner wrap it so that I can't see it, so it's a little bit more special. And then I'll have a Christmas Eve cast on instead. So that's kind of why those socks happened, was I wanted a warm Christmas themed, really just toasty toes sock, and so I cast those on, and those are my two new whips. Let's now talk about what I've worked on since last week that you would have saw in that podcast. Project bags are back. Okay, so put these down here. They're gonna get covered in dog hair like everything else in my life, and I even tried to calm down the dog hair this time. Okay, so this was last week. I talked about this as my entry into the Crit and Knit cal. That's the word I'm looking for. And it is the Adrift Shawl by Vera Villamaki. Vera and then a V last name. I'm so sorry. I will put it in the down bar. And this is, the Adrift Shawl. So I put the stitch marker where I was last week so that we can see progress. I'm so nearly done. The last seed moss, I think she calls it moss stitch, the last moss stitch section. And then I do some more, like you can see there's like eyelets in the transitions. And then I do another garter stitch and then I bind off. It is a very shallow, in-depth, but long shawl, which I love. I love the shape because I tend to wear shawls either how I'm wearing this, just like over my shoulders to keep myself warm, or I like wrap it and use it like this so that it's super bundly up against my neck. I don't really wear them any other way. I have a triangle shawl that I tend to wear, again wrapped, but like a triangle over the front, which I like. And I think that's a good like transitional way to wear a shawl. But I just imagine this, it's going to be so like light and airy and nice once I block it out, that like on like a cool evening in the warm seasons or like transitional seasons over my shoulders is just going to be, I just have this vision of like, oh, I'm just chilly, I'll just throw it over my shoulders, you know, like I don't know what it is about that, but that pleases me. So yes, we are getting there. I'm on the like, I think 10th of 10 repeats, like we're nearly there. So that is that. This is on Hannah from the Corner of Craft, Chromatic Yarns, merino sock, I believe. I do have on my Ravelry, so if you want to know the base, but I believe it's merino sock. And it is on the Yes, I'm Very Sweet colorway, which is named after Kiri the Kenku from Critical Role. If you know, you know. That character fills my heart with such joy. Oh my gosh, she's just the cutest. So that's that in my Lord of the Rings bag. Up next, let's talk about mittens. Mittens that I lost steam on and could have finished 3 times over, but just haven't picked up. So last week I didn't have the ball bands, so I wasn't able to talk about the colors. I do this time. So these are palette fingering weight yarn, 50 grams, 231 yards, which is a really generous fingering weight. It's quite thin, 2-ply, non-superwash, Peruvian wool, question mark? Yep, I'm killing it. So the light color is Seraphim, and the darker color is Clematis Heather. And with these, I am making some mittens. So I believe, had I done the color work last week? I don't remember, but these are my modified Heli mittens. They're a fingering weight pattern that I am adapting to be fingering held double or like DK to worsted weight. Which just, it's a free pattern. So basically what I've done is I've taken the 6-stitch repeat, and instead of doing it however many times you would do for the regular pattern, I'm doing it 7 times for the stitch count that I have. And I'm doing a make one right, make one left side thumb gusset, whereas the pattern has you build this like really nice like anatomical thumb. We skipped on that. And I'm doing similar decreases to the pattern. So this is also on Ravelry with like stitch counts and sort of my recipe, I guess. So I have one mitten nearly done without a thumb, and the second mitten is at the point where I need to start the color work. I knit when I'm relaxing, watching television in the evenings, or I knit, like I'll have a sock when I'm like work meeting, you know, no, don't have to look at it, but I can still knit it, sort of a deal. So, color work has just been on the back burner for me. I just didn't want to pick it up and pay attention. So that's why these are here. I think I'm going to try to finish them either tonight or tomorrow. I have a day off, and I'm going to try to get these done and blocked so that everything can get sent out this week, because this week, and then we have like, basically we have 2 more weekends and then it's the Christmas weekend, and I don't know if everyone's going to get their stuff in time at this rate, but I will do my level best, won't I? Okay, yes, actually, with that being said, there's some things that I might just, like next time I film, I might just have to insert a picture, because I don't know if I'm gonna film like the mittens that are gonna go with that cowl and my dad's headband and stuff. I might just do a photo, or I'll just direct you to my Ravelry. But yeah, Christmas knitting, I do it to myself and then I wonder why every time. Okay, this is my super simple summer sweater by Joji Locatelli. I have affectionately dubbed this one my super simple woolly sweater because I'm not making it out of a cotton blend. I'm making it out of 100% non-superwash wool and spun wool. So not exactly as she intended, but I wanted this sweater, but I wanted a warm version. Here we are. Not that the original wouldn't be warm with the 50% wool, 50% cotton, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, so this, as I pick dog hair off of it, this is how far I am on this. I don't remember last time. I think I was either still in the green or I had just switched to the gray. So yeah, I've done a few more rounds on this. I actually should count because I feel like I'm really close to switching. And then I'm so close that I knit a few rounds of the green, and then I do the split hem, and then I do sleeves. I think this one and my Adrift Shawl are the closest whips for me clearing the needles into the new year. Last time I talked about hopefully not casting on anything new and clearing my needles to start the new year off strong with like my intentions and the patterns that I want to make and all these things that I have yarn for that I need to create. And so far, so with this and like the shawl, I'm pretty close to being done. I have a week off in December from work that I'm thinking will be pretty knitting heavy. I'll probably podcast in and around that time too. And the socks are socks. Like I don't personally count socks. I count them as whips for the like purposes of showing them as whips, but I don't count them in the mental box that I have for my whips. I don't count them because they don't stress me out. I count a whip as one that I want to focus on and clear the needles and whatever, if they are shawls or sweaters. Because I find socks so, at this point, so mindless that I could pick up a sock in the middle of a heel and know what to do next. Like I'm not needing to look at a pattern. They're just sort of happening. yeah, that's how I feel about socks. So I'm a little less concerned about, I'm looking in this direction because I'm looking at the sock webs. I'm a little less concerned about those and a little more concerned about getting this and my 2 shawls off the needles. And by concerned, I just mean that I think it would help me with my 2022 intentions by having those off the needles. I'm going to do my best to get the sweater and the shawl done. My second shawl that I talked about last time is the Brio Garter wedge shawl, Brio Garter split shawl by Stephen West. And it is a scrappy shawl that I've sort of decided I'm going to use some of my pink toned speckly scraps with. If I don't finish that before the end of the year, I will not be bothered because at the end of the day, it is a scrappy project. And so that is sort of taking up a different type of brain space for me. And so I'm a little less concerned by it. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. And those are my plans for those whips. I also want to take a moment here to discuss plans for like future projects and discuss yarn pairing, why I chose what I chose, how I choose patterns and things like that. I want to add this segment, like I said at the beginning, mostly because I won't be doing a stash acquisition section ever, but this is a good opportunity to showcase if I'm using an indie dyer, if I'm not, and why I chose not to, yarn pairings, gauge swatches, choosing a size, like all these things I think are really valuable and I think can sometimes get glossed over when we talk about our knitting because we're so excited about the pattern that we made and, you know, if we made modifications or the yarn that we're using, and those are all very important and valuable things that we want to share with one another. But I think that there is a hole that I'm trying to fill for what I wish people talked about in their podcasts when I watch them. So I'm like, okay, if I wish that that was discussed, then I'm going to discuss it in my own podcast. So what I mean by that is I want to talk about patterns that are exciting to me, patterns that I'm really looking forward to making and why. And sort of like what my thought process was in seeing the Instagram photo or seeing the Ravelry page, and then where my brain then went after that, right? Because it's one thing to see a pattern and go, oh, I want to knit that one day, or see a yarn and go, oh, I want to use that one day. And it's another to put those two things together. And I think that I'm finally at a point, I'm 2 and a bit years into knitting, I'm finally at a point where I actually am confident enough in my ability to know what I'm going to like when I make a garment. I hope that makes sense. So like, for example, I'll start talking about the first one. So my example here is going to be the yarn that I'm planning to use for Andrea Mowry's The Weekender sweater. I'm gonna do my absolute best to put a photo in. Did I do it? I don't know. We'll see if editing me can figure that out. If not, The Weekender, I will link it down below. Essentially, The Weekender is a boxy, oversized boat neck sweater, and it is a worsted weight pattern. So immediately, when I see anything over DK, my brain immediately goes away from small batch indie dyed yarn and immediately to the more accessible big box, not even big box, but like just more accessible price wise and also just more accessible quantity wise, because worsted weight immediately requires more yarn because the yardage is lower. So for this, I decided to use good old trusty Wool of the Andes worsted weight. I'm again picking off so much dog hair. I'm so sorry. So yeah, Wool of the Andes worsted weight in Garnet Heather. The reason I chose this is I knit my friend last year a sweater for Christmas, and every single stitch was a joy. I loved the color. This yarn is a delight. It was a good time, except for the time that I accidentally messed up the sleeve and the stitches fell down to the German short rows and I wasn't sure how to fix it. And then I fixed it really ugly on the inside of the sweater. And like, if he wears that, God bless him, because I wouldn't. But I gave it to him anyways. So yeah, so this is Wool of the Andes. I decided to use this for the Weekender because I think that it is cost effective and like seasonally appropriate for the sweater that I'm going to make. And I just know that I like this yarn. So that's sort of where I went with that. I went, okay, what's a yarn that I know that I like? What are the qualities of that sweater that I want the yarn to sort of provide? And for me, if I'm going to wear an oversized sweater, I want it to be nice and drapey. I don't want a stiff fabric. So I went with a lighter worsted, so that, like, here's my swatch. You can kind of see, it is quite airy. This is a US 9 down here, and this is a US 8 up here. It's quite airy, and so that to me is a good sign. And I talked about this with my, what did I call it? I talked about this with my super simple summer sweater, is that an airier fabric with a heavier woolly yarn is my happy place, because I won't get too warm. So yeah, so I did a swatch. These little pearl bumps are to say that, like, there's 8 pearl bumps, so this is a US 8. There's 9 pearl bumps, so this is a US 9. It's just a way for me to remember, because otherwise I will pick up this swatch and go, I can't actually tell which one is which. I knit this a long time ago. I thought I was gonna cast on this sweater a lot sooner, but I decided the month of November was going to be gift knit, so it just didn't happen. With that being said, this is likely going to be one of the first sweaters that I cast on in the new year. I'll probably cast it on once I cast off the other sweater that I have. So this one is, where was I going with that? This one is going to be a simple, but like, it is a slightly new construction with I've read through the pattern, the way that the shoulders are like sewn together and the way that the neckline is bound off. It has some like really pretty finishing techniques. There's a tubular cast on that I've only ever done one time. So I'm excited to play with the sweater, because it kind of checks all the boxes for me when it comes to a sweater that I know that I will like and that I will wear, which is a simple but engaging pattern that requires some detail, like to finishing and stuff, but is otherwise fairly straightforward. So what I mean by that is an all over lace, all over color work, all over cables is not something that I am interested in knitting at this time. However, that could change, right? Like I could be like, okay, miles of stockinette is no longer for me, and maybe I'll change my mind in the future. But for now, this is where we're at. So yeah, so that's my plans for the Andrea Mowry Weekender sweater. That's sort of like the process that I have come to. I'm going to see what my gauge is with the US, probably 8, if I'm honest. The 9 is a little too big. I'm gonna see what my gauge is for the US 8 and choose a size with that gauge, if it's not pattern gauge. If you have questions about how to do that, let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy when I do cast on this sweater to talk a little bit more about that. I think there are more qualified people online that you can find a YouTube video about how to do that, like how to choose a size based on your gauge and not based on the pattern's gauge. But yeah, if you're curious about that, let me know and I'll speak about it when I cast this on. So that's that. And then my last future cast on, probably around like after Christmas, New Year's time, is going to be my friend Kelsey from Knitting Nakabi has a hat pattern called Storm's Approach. I really hope that's right. Storm's Approach, Storm Approaches, Storm's Approaching. Something along those lines. And it uses the bramble stitch. And I remember when we very first our infancy of our friendship, when we first started like getting the group together to play D&D, and I remember like going online and Instagram and Ravelry to check out Kelsey's work, and this hat immediately caught my attention. The bramble stitch is so cute, and the like slouchy style is really beautiful. Again, I'll try to put a picture here. Did I do it? I don't know. And there's the bramble stitch that I've never done. It has a purl 3 together. I think that's what it is, which she said that sometimes people have trouble with it. And I'm like, I have sharp needles, I'll figure it out. And it also has a lateral braid, which I've never done. So a couple of techniques that are new to me, which I find fun and interesting. And I don't mind slightly more look at the knitting while you're knitting. Say that 3 times fast. if it's a hat or mitts or something like that, because they're fairly quick. So no problem there. I'm holding this mohair. I'm going to talk about it, I promise. So this is Southampton Valley Yarns. It's a Webb's brand mohair. I bought this just in case for my mittens that I talked about last time with the Nutidin. In case I ran out of the mohair that I had with that Nutidin, I bought this as a backup. I have 2 balls of it. So this is 72% kid silk mohair. No, 72% kid mohair, 28% silk. 230 yards for 25 grams. So that's what that looks like. It's so soft. Oh my God. I love it. So soft. Okay, so that's that. Very cost effective. It's Webb's, blah, blah, blah. And then this is Firewood Fiber Co., who is a Canadian hand dyer, and I bought this at Wolseley Wools in Winnipeg. So this is Buttercup DK. It's 100% blue-faced Leicester. I've used BFL before in a garment and I really liked it, so I'm really excited about this base. This was actually picked up accidentally as DK. I picked it up because I loved the color and I bought it and I thought it was fingering weight and I was like, oh, this will make a great Musselburgh or Ripple Bralette or something like that. But it is DK weight, so it could be a Ripple Bralette DK, but I want it to be this hat. I originally got the pattern to knit it for a friend, but the yarn I was going to use for a friend was too heavyweight. So this pattern is DK and mohair. I have DK and mohair. The color combo I think is going to be really fun because there's some like matchy blue, but there's also like this really beautiful purple. Yeah, periwinkle purple. I'd call that purple. And some really pretty like pinks and stuff. So I think I was talking about this like looking down, staring at it lovingly because it's so pretty. If you know anything about me, moonstone and things that evoke moonstone vibes, if you will, are very much up my alley. Blue and pink. Yeah, I'm a fan. So, these are going to go together as a Storm's Approach hat by Kelsey from Knitting Nakabi, and I am so very excited for this cast on. I'm going to pause and then I'll talk about, we'll knitical think together, shall we? All right. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, I wanted to take a moment to do my knitical thinking segment, and the reason I sort of cut myself short there while I was talking about like future projects and stuff is because I sort of wanted to have this conversation in the knitical thinking place. So what I want to do with this segment is sort of talk about something that has been on my mind as it pertains to knitting, and sort of get your thoughts on it. So in the comments, or if you would prefer to do privately, like as a DM or something, I'm totally open to that. Come be my friend. But yeah, I have my Ravelry queue right now is at, I think, about 13 patterns. It might be 12. And all of those patterns, I have the yarn and like the sweater quantity for. Now, what I want to preface this conversation with is I am knitical thinking. I am critically assessing my relationship with knitting right now. My relationship with my knitting, right? So I don't want this to be a situation where you feel as though the way that you've chosen to create a yarn stash or plan your projects or anything like that is on the chopping block here. I have so much like admiration for those of us who are able to plan their projects and stick to that plan, or are the opposite where they don't need a plan and it doesn't bother them that they don't have a plan. Like if I could live my life that way, I absolutely would, but I get anxious when I have put self-imposed plans and deadlines on myself and then I don't meet them, right? So I have learned how to work with myself in that way and sort of mitigate those feelings of anxiety and stress. So I'm going to pick up knitting while I'm talking because I feel like that makes more sense, because otherwise I'm just going to be like flailing my hands. So the reason I wanted to bring this up is that I sort of alluded to like having feelings about stash yarn in my last episode, and there were a couple of comments that said like, hey, like I'd love to hear more about what you mean by that. So here's what I mean by that. Above me, and you can't really see because my camera is angled in such a way that the whole thing is not visible, I have what I like kind of call my yarn shelves. The words yarn stash are a little bit weird to me because stash has an implication with, the word stash has an implication with like drug use that I'm not a huge fan of the word stash in regards to my knitting, and also like the idea of being addicted to yarn. Like that language is a little bit uncomfortable for me. So I tend to sort of like avoid that. But yeah, so my yarn shelves all of my like sweater quantities, save for one that's downstairs because that is a Lion brand Woolies sweater quantity that I bought that was originally going to be a gift sweater, but now it's not going to be. That's downstairs because I have yarn shelves downstairs too. That's more of my like acrylic and like stuff I bought earlier on before I realized I like knitting with wool. So my stash is about a dozen sweater quantities, a couple shawls, and some self-striping sock yarn, or non-self-striping sock yarn, but sock yarn. For some people, that sounds like a ton. And for others, they're going to be like, why would that stress you out? That's like barely anything compared to my stash, right? Like everyone's idea of a lot of yarn is going to be different. For me, as it stands right now, I've realized this is a lot of yarn. And I bring this up because I had a moment about halfway through this year where I had made a Make 9 and I had all of these plans. And since I made those plans at the beginning of 2021, my stash, my yarn shelf, had changed dramatically, and I had more patterns that I wanted to make and more yarn to make those patterns than I did at the start of the year. And I hadn't completed the sweaters or garments or whatever it was in that Make 9 that I already had the yarn for at the beginning of 2021. So I had not only acquired more yarn for a shelf, but I had also not completed the patterns with the yarn that I already had. And for me, that posed a little bit of like puzzlement. And a lot of you are probably watching this and going, yeah, that's how knitting works. That's how the craft works. Like you just end up accumulating things because yarn is pretty and buying yarn is a fun time. And so that's just what it is. And I kind of want to challenge that a little bit and say, why is that the way that it is? Because for me, I only need as much yarn as I'm going to use. And while I have the intention and the desire to make the sweaters that those yarns were purchased for, it hasn't gone away. They haven't changed. There's one sweaters quantity and one pattern that I sort of wished I had chosen something else for. And ultimately, it's DK weight. I can find another pattern and I can get yarn for the pattern that I want to make in the right way, or my right way. But so, you know, I'm not running into this, oh, I really liked it a year ago and now it's not my style. That hasn't happened. But what is sort of puzzling is this idea that it's never enough. There's always a new pattern. There's always a new yarn. There's always a new technique or colorway combination or whatever that's going to interest me and I'm going to want to participate in it. And I am challenging that for myself to say, but is that actually the part of the hobby and of the craft that I'm wanting to participate in? And I don't know that it is. I think what is important to me about knitting is making something that I am proud of, that I get to use and wear, and talking to people who also find their joy making things out of yarn. That's what's important to me. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm still with a hobby. Like that's why this has happened for me. Is ultimately I like to make things and I like to talk about the things that I made, because it's connection. It's a human experience, right? To share and connect and to make relationships and all these things. The side of the craft that is the consumerism purchasing side is not one that my relationship has with that side of knitting did not start and has not become a positive one. So when I love that I can support indie dyers or independent pattern makers. I do love that. But what I hope to do moving forward, and this is sort of my 2022 intention bit, I want to be super specific when I buy yarn and why I'm doing it. Because what I want to avoid is I saw something pretty on Instagram, I wait for the shop update, I buy it, and then it sits on my shelf for a year because I don't have time to get to it. And again, everyone has sort of their own way of looking at that where, well, yarn doesn't go bad. It can sit on your shelf until you're ready to use it. There's nothing wrong with that. And while I agree that, yes, my yarn will be there when I'm ready for it, I have enough right now to, I already have yarn waiting for me for when I'm ready for it. And so what I would prefer to do is encourage and support those dyers in a different way by sharing, by, posting about them, by talking about them here, all those things I will continue to do. But I have noticed that like when an indie dyer specifically, when it comes to yarn, does a shop update, they sell out incredibly fast. And part of that is just the absolute love and support that this community tends to have for people who are putting themselves out there and who are starting a business or have started and are, running a successful business. We love that and we support that. And it's incredible. It's one of the best parts about this community. And I've seen some of those folks say, yeah, I can't do in-stock updates because they sell out in 2 seconds. So either the in-stock update upsets a bunch of people that didn't get the yarn, or you do pre-order and you have to wait for your yarn, which is my preferred way of shopping because I don't like the stress. So that's all good with me. But then I sit back and I go, okay, all of these things can be true at once, is that there are folks buying the yarn because they want to support the maker. And there are folks buying the yarn because they have a project in mind and they're going to use the yarn, right? But there's also this part of knitting and the consumerist part of this hobby is that in a lot of situations, what's happening is this product is being purchased and then is sitting on a yarn shelf and is not being made into beautiful projects and is sitting there being looked at. And some folks genuinely, buying yarn is one hobby, knitting it is the other hobby. They're separate for them. And what I'm, trying to convey is that these two things are not separate for me. So what I want to sort of avoid is buying yarn that I won't get to use until, whenever I get around to it. And I would rather keep that yarn available to the person who is buying yarn is one hobby, knitting is the other type of person, or genuinely doesn't stash their yarn and is only buying this and has like the exact perfect project that they have in mind for it and is going to knit it right away, or like whatever that person's experience is. Basically what I'm saying is, for me, buying yarn because it's pretty and because I want to support someone is only causing me more stress. I find that I am then looking at a pattern that I really want to knit, that I really have plans for, that I like, oh, the perfect yarn would be this. And then I already that month bought the pretty yarn that I don't have plans for yet. And so I'm not then buying the thing that I actually have intention of using sooner, right? So I think that this is kind of where I'm at with this is, for me, it doesn't make sense to buy yarn unless I have a plan for it. I will say that I'm not infallible. Like, it is distinctly possible that, you know, Kate from Red Dwarfs will do, her next series will be on another book that I've been really enjoying, and I'll have to buy it. But at that point, I also can look at that and go, I'll buy a skein of my favorite colorway, not a sweater quantity and a shawl quantity, right? Like, as an example. So I don't know if this is resonating with anyone. I don't know if this even makes sense ultimately, but I think what I'm trying to say is my goals for 2022 are to knit from stash. And if I'm going to buy more yarn, I'm going to have an intention to use it, and a project that I have in mind. Essentially, I want my project queue to influence the yarn that I purchase and not the other way around. Because I find that I am more successful, my garments are more successful, and I count a successful garment as one that I want to wear. My garments are more successful when I choose the yarn because I already love the pattern, and not I chose the pattern because I had this really pretty yarn. So that's, my neighbor's cat is just trotting along the driveway and it's so cute. That's sort of my thoughts on yarn collections and knitting and those types of things. If this made any sense to any of you, please do let me know. But yeah, that's sort of where I've been at. And I think it's also, this year is one of the first years that I've actually been purchasing hand-dyed yarn and been excited for shop updates and all of these things. And I sort of just realized that, like, while I really liked and was excited about buying those yarns, I'm not sure that it's going to suit ultimately what my hand knit wardrobe is going to be, which is likely going to be a lot of garments that are not hand-dyed yarn. It's going to be the Rosa Pomar, Mundime, and Briska styles of yarn, or like something like this. Like, it's going to just be a little more muted and a little more solid and a little, those types of things. I think I could change my mind, but that's sort of where I'm at with that. So that's been my knitical thinking segment. That's been my how I'm going to buy yarn in the future segment. I really am excited to see how the year progresses and how my yarn stash dwindles and how that makes me feel. And if I actually do prefer buying yarn as a hobby and I do prefer having my shelves looking beautiful, who knows? I could shock myself. I could say, actually, that's better. But ultimately what I fear is having so much yarn that I couldn't possibly knit it in my entire lifetime. And then where does that yarn go? It does a little bit stem from an environmental concern and just a general too much stuff concern. Fast fashion is already such a problem that I'm like, we can't knit nearly as fast as companies can make garments. So, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not comparing it as apples and apples. It is a little bit apples and oranges, but yeah, I'm concerned that, like, I see a lot of really fast knitters making, like, just churning out garments throughout the year. And my concern is then what happens to those garments? Do you like wearing them? I know that some folks have done a really good job of paying it forward and providing those garments a second home. And I know that there are some people who will do that, but I also know that there are plenty who will not. And I just started this craft as a way to avoid fast fashion. And I am worried that I'm contributing to a negative environment in other ways. And so I've just sort of, I've had to sit and think about that. And yeah, that's where I'm at there. I'm curious what you guys think about yarn collections and planning for your knitting, and yeah, just your relationship with that. I think that for my one of my first videos in 2022 will definitely be talking about the patterns that I intend to make with the yarn that I have, and sort of like a make 9, but it might not be 9. We'll see. Yeah, so I'm gonna do that for sure. And that's more or less my knitical thinking segment for today. I do have one more thing to add, just because I think that it was something that happened, and that is really important to talk about in between my last episode and now, which is Instagram. The Instagram knitting community has been reminded that racism does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in knitting too, and it's sort of reared its ugly head in the form of Christy Glass criticism. And I just wanted to touch on it because it's important to me that the people who watch this channel know my stance on situations like this. And my stance is not that we should just get back to our knitting. It is that we should listen to Black women when they speak about pain that they've experienced, and criticize the person or people who have caused that pain. And so that means believing people when they speak on an issue. And it also means talking about a potential issue before it is a situation where the Black women in our community have to do the legwork for us. I watched Christy Glass videos for like one Saturday a year ago and watched a few and went, something is off about this whole situation. I have a feeling that me and this woman do not have similar values. I'm going to stop watching her. And that's as far as I took it, because I had no knitting platform or anyone to talk to except for my partner. And I told my partner that day, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I like her very much. I don't know if I trust that she is like for the people the way she says she's for the people. And you know, having a platform is not the prerequisite to speaking out. And so I guess in hindsight, I wished that I had sort of, even within the, like my circles with the people that I know in knitting, if I just said, hey, if you watch this person, you want to do a vibe check with me? What do you think? Should maybe, you know, this be more well known or at least talked about so that she has the chance to even identify it herself and, you know, move forward with grace, which she did not do. We saw that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to bring that up and let folks know, if you're curious where I stand on those types of issues, that I am firmly in the camp of it is a white woman's job to stand in the gap and to do the work with the Black women and to believe them and allow them to speak. Don't speak over them, but also don't make it their job to be the only ones to ever call people out. Because ultimately, the only way that this is going to change is if white women put their comfortability down for a second and force ourselves to feel uncomfortable so that this can change. Because that's the only way forward, is to understand that these conversations are messy, and have your tears with your white friends, have your guilt with your white friends, shed it, and then come to the front of the group and get ready to help. Because Black women cannot be responsible for being treated like a human being alone. It's just not, it's not possible. So that's my 2 cents on that. If you disagree and you think that Christy Glass was bullied and unfairly treated, the dislike button is below, and you can also unsubscribe, because that's not what we do here. On this channel, we are queer. We believe Black Lives Matter. We believe in reproductive health and rights for everyone. The list goes on. Science is real. Wear a mask. Get a vaccine. etc., etc. That's where we stand on this channel. So if you were confused by that or unsure, now you know. And I will leave knitical thinking at that. I think that's a pretty strong message. My point has been made. Yes, if you have anything to add to that conversation, leave it down to the comments below. It can be about racism in knitting. It can be about yarn buying and pattern planning, and if it stresses you out, if it doesn't stress you out. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And yeah, with that, I think that's everything. I was gonna do like a personal segment about like the shows that I've been watching and the books that I've been listening to on Audible and stuff, but I think I will leave it at that, and then maybe next time we'll discuss. I will say, if you're a fantasy fan and you have Amazon Prime, you should watch Wheel of Time. It's freaking fabulous. All right. I hope you stick around. I hope you enjoyed. I can't wait to share with you guys probably in about 2 weeks what I've been working on, and I will see you in the next one.